All
Are we
right,
live?
because we're live.
Okay.
Yes. Hello, everyone. So, everyone, welcome to our Facebook Live tonight. I am super excited to have with us the infamous Kelvin Mah of Rankbreeze. And so, do you guys remember a couple of weeks back when we had a little case study where one of our Facebook members posted that her listing just wasn't really showing up? Sometimes it was showing up to her on like the first page. However, she wasn't getting any bookings. Debbie, I hope you're here. And so we all chipped in, we troubleshooted. Thank you, Tracy. Thank you, Bart. Thank you, everyone who contributed. And there's a fly. Yeah, that's great. And so, yes, I'm getting a lot of yeses in the comments. Yes. Hey, Ron. Hey, Teo. So what happened was when I placed her property into Kelvin's tool, Rankbreeze, we identified that she was showing up based on those search terms, of course, but she was showing up on page 17 plus is what it said. And that's not really a good place, right? If you're trying to get your property booked in a market that is really hot, which was the Smokies, right? The Smokies, no, Blue Ridge of Georgia. Lots of beautiful cabins. Her pictures were stunning. Beautiful cabins, beautiful experience. She had the fire pit, she had all the lights. I mean, it was just gorgeous. But why was she on page 17? Why was she not getting all the bookings? So Rankbreeze really helped out in identifying where she was. And then after we pulled all the levers and take a look, I did a quick snapshot of her before and after. After we pull all the levers, she moved to page 1. Okay. So with that, I got a lot of chatter on the back channels. Like, what is this tool, Rankbreeze? How did you, find out exactly which page that she was on? And so Kelvin, I invited him here today. He is the founder of Rankbreeze to kind of tell us a little bit about himself. Tell us about yourself and tell us what is Rankbreeze, Kelvin.
Sure. I always have a weird time speaking about myself, but in general, I'm a Canadian Airbnb host. Kind of started hosting, and my background is in digital marketing, I suppose. But I kind of popped on and started realizing, oh, this is kind of strange how Airbnb organizes these properties. Where am I showing up and how come I'm showing up like this? And that just sent me down a pretty deep rabbit hole, and eventually just started to research things and putting content out there to share things out with people. And then eventually this just ended up becoming a tool because, quite frankly, it was a big pain in the butt to constantly be checking my rankings all the time. And, when I think that's one thing too that will probably go along is that sometimes people say, there's one rank, right? But there isn't just one rank. There's tons of different rankings. All of your rankings are all put together, and that kind of formulates your overall search visibility. But that's a little bit about myself. Rankbreeze is a software and services company. We have a software product that revolves around rank optimization, some price optimization, as well as market data as well. And the services end it's kind of like our optimized listing description service. It's where we help people essentially relaunch their listing. And we can talk about that a little bit later, but that's probably we can probably just leave it at that.
Okay. So Kelvin, you touched on so many good points. So, and this is something that I know that a lot of the short-term rental investors are quite aware of by this point, but just in case you're not aware of this, listeners and those in the listening lounge, if you go and search Airbnb for your area, just to scope out where is your listing on there. Why is it that sometimes I'm on page 1, sometimes I'm on page 2, but oftentimes more than not, I'm on page 1 and I feel really proud of myself. But what if I'm not getting any bookings? Is there something wrong with the way I'm searching for my property? Is it telling me the truth? Is it, is that the source of truth? Or is there some kind of, is Big Brother watching over my shoulder and he recognizes that, hey, she keeps looking at her property, I'll keep presenting her own property. So you tell me, bust the myths, tell us the truth. Tell us about that.
Sure. So there's probably a few things in there. And I think the main question was whether or not when you are searching for your property, are you doing it correctly? So probably the best practice would be to turn incognito mode on and then search for your property. But there's a lot of different ways that somebody can find your listing, right? They can go search for your property on specific, let's say you have your entire calendar open for the next 30 days. And, somebody could be searching from the 1st of the month to the 5th of the month, from the 2nd of the month to the 4th of the month. So there's lots of different ranges in terms of those date ranges and how you're going to show up. But overall, the best practice would be to turn on incognito mode and then search for your property from that lens. One thing that's maybe interesting here that we could talk about is that little part where you mentioned, hey, is Airbnb showing my property higher up in the search rankings, assuming like you're not on incognito mode. And yeah, most likely it is because you are visiting your property, because there's a few different factors there, but overall what that means is that there's some personalization that's involved. When a guest is searching on Airbnb, they're going to get some personalization in their search results. We did run a test on this actually. What we saw was that the personalization, how many listings that are actually personalized to a search to a guest searching is actually usually just the first few listings at the top of the page. It's the rest of the listings are pretty much the same rankings as everyone else sees, but it's just those first few that have to do with what they booked in the past and also what they most likely recently looked at as well. So that's what a guest is seeing. And if you are going to run a search for yourself, then just make sure you're popped onto incognito mode.
Okay. And so, but I think that's the most important, right? To being on the first top, right, of the page is really important, because oftentimes, being on page one, being at the top, those are the properties, in my perception, are the ones that are going to get booked. Unless you change my mind, let me know the truth.
I think there's a few ways to think about that. At least for myself, when I'm searching on Airbnb, I will go through a few depths of pages. I might even go all the way to the 4th page in general. That's kind of my search, because I'm very particular about. I really like views. So if I'm looking for a property, it usually I'm trying to rent something with a view. And that's and that's my own personal preference, right? But in general, what you're talking about when you're ranked higher, one of the benefits of being ranked higher is that, at least from what we've seen, when a property reaches that level of being on the 1st and 2nd page, they tend to actually stay there for a longer period of time. And that's great, right? Because what we've seen is, if you're ranked a little bit lower, you will bounce around a lot more, versus when you're ranked higher at the top, your visibility doesn't change as much, which is a good thing, because we're running like millions of searches. So that's kind of what we've seen, is that when a property reaches the 1st, 2nd page, they tend to stay there for a longer period of time. And the reason that we believe that that's happening is mostly to do with, because there's more data being collected about your property, because when you're on the 1st and 2nd page, there's just more people looking at it. There's more eyeballs, there's more opportunities to improve your click-through rates, there's more opportunities to improve other ranking factors, such as how long somebody spends in there, the overall booking rate, things like that. There's just more data that's being collected for a property that is ranked higher, and that tends to be a benefit, right? It's when we're talking about rankings and search engine optimization, or SEO, if you guys have kind of heard that term, it's really a long-term game, right? So that's kind of the nice circle that we can talk about.
Gotcha. So you spoke about some metrics, and I know for you, you're probably a data jockey going through spreadsheets, and they're all important. But for an investor, what's important for me is the booking rate, right? I want to get booked, period. So
yeah,
I have the pricing strategy, I have all of that behind it, but yes, visibility, yes, click through, yes, length of time on my listing, all of those are great, but am I getting that conversion? Am I getting booked? Are there any metrics that you would say are pretty in line with booking rates? Do they all kind of factor into the booking rate? What should we be looking at as we're kind of analyzing, the behaviors of our potential guests as they're coming through and looking at our listings?
That is a good question. I know you kind of put it through the lens of an investor. I am trying to think about how to connect those two things. But I mean, overall, your booking rate is essentially the number of people that visited your listing divided by, or sorry, no, it would be the number of bookings that you received divided by the number of people that viewed your listing page, not viewed your listing on the search results, but is more along the lines of the people that actually visited the page and then booked or contacted you. That's kind of a micro conversion. It's, if you want to think of it like this, it's kind of I think the best way for me to explain it is that there's the art and the science, right? So the art is things like creating a collage for your photo, for your cover photo, or your feature photo, or whatever you want to call it, right? Creating that collage for your photo, it does stand out, and that's kind of the art behind it, right? Because you're creating collage, but really the science is that you're just trying to drive clicks and improve your click-through rate. So hopefully that maybe, I don't know if that exactly answers your question, but if you want to think of from a high level perspective, probably the art and the science it would be a good, probably approachable way to think about that.
Got it. And it's funny that you say that, because that's one of the suggestions that we implemented with the listing, Debbie's listing that I was discussing a little bit earlier for our mini case study there. So that's pretty awesome. So tell me something, what are the top 3 things I can do to improve my listing?
The top 3 things that you can do. Well, I think we're kind of on that subject right now in terms of the art and science, because that's probably just going to go a little bit deeper. We can go a little bit deeper with that. Overall, I think the first thing that you may want to think about is just going for and thinking about those small conversions along the way, right? And breaking things down in how a person searches on Airbnb and then ultimately finds your property and then decides to book, right? There's, I guess the first thing would be, when they're running that search and they're searching, they're putting in filters and things like that. That's one thing. And so when they arrive and they see your listing on the search results, that's one small conversion to focus on, would be the click-through rate, like we mentioned. So the click-through rate is essentially how many people viewed your property on the search results page and then ultimately click through. So that's one small conversion, right? And then from a view to a booking is another way to think about that. So that's kind of the science that we're talking about, right? So how many views did you get divided by, or sorry, how many bookings did you get divided by the views that you did in a specific time period. So those are kind of things that you want to start thinking about, is just thinking about the small conversions that a guest goes through and how to kind of optimize your property for that. There's a few different ways to do that, but I think in general, you just want to think about small conversions along the way, because all those little tiny things do ultimately lead to somebody booking your property, right? Nobody can even get to your property unless they see your property in general, right? So just think about that and put that in the back of your head. So probably that's the first thing I would think about. In general, I would love for people to come and try us out, but that would be the second tip, is to just add your property into Rankbreeze, because then you can actually understand where your search visibility is, right? So for us, I'm trying not to get too deep here, but when you're looking at your properties in Rankbreeze, you're actually seeing an average of your overall performance throughout the day, and through many different searches. So that kind of gives you a better sense of not just one search that you ran, but thousands and thousands of different searches that we run for your property, just to see where you're ranking. And then from there, you can kind of make these decisions on whether you want to adjust your title, adjust your description, adjust your photos, focus on conversion rates, things like that. And we provide these tips for you inside of Rankbreeze as well. So when you add your property in Rankbreeze, you can kind of see your search visibility, and you have these little things that you can do to look at your title. So titles are very important. We can maybe double click on that and see how that works. So your title is I think people don't get enough out of squeezing more out of their titles, because your photo, you wanna, you probably know which photo is probably gonna work the best for you. And if you're not, you're really just gonna change the whole thing. And like I said, like instead of going from like a single photo, you're gonna do the collage, right? But in terms of your title, I think things that people might be missing is that people can find you on Airbnb in all sorts of different ways, right? I think I have a regular way of searching on Airbnb myself, but I talked to my friend and he tells me that he doesn't even look at the map. He just turns the map off and he just looks straight down, up and down the properties. I forget what that's called, but it's essentially you turning off the map, and he's not really thinking about location. He's just trying to find the best property that he can. So these are different ways that people are searching. But another way that people also find properties is just going on Airbnb, and when they're typing in their search, so for example, their city, sometimes they might put something like Miami rooftop, let's say, and then all of a sudden all these rooftop places pop up in the search suggestions right below. So that is another reason and way that you can kind of squeeze more out of your title. So that's the second thing, I guess. And so the first is focus on small conversions. The second is adding your properties into Rankbreeze in general, just understanding where your search visibility is. And the third thing kind of goes along with that is that you kind of want to test different things out, right? Like things change, and Airbnb updates their algorithm from what we've seen around every 15 days. So we just noticed that there's a lot of shifts that happen about every 15 days. I think just put out a release, and that's kind of maybe their cycle for releases. So that's maybe something to keep in mind. I know some people, I was on the phone with somebody the other day and he was asking about whether or not he was kind of worried, and he thought that maybe he was being punished by Airbnb. And I just kind of said, you may want just wait like 15 days and see how the dust settles from there, because you never know exactly what's going to happen. But in general, you want to test your assumptions, because it can take some time to get results. I think that what Rachel did was awesome because she's really good at what she does. But in general, some things take time, especially the improvement of rankings, right? Like to get to that first position there and to stay there for a long period of time, it takes time. And a lot of that has to do with testing things and just letting Airbnb do its thing, letting the data be collected around the net amount of clicks. Like is a title that you made, maybe you put an offer in your title, like 25% offer, or maybe you're talking about a specific month, or you want to put a bonus. I don't know exactly what, but those little changes that you make, just give Airbnb a little bit of more time to actually analyze your property and assess it based on the other properties, and then kind of see how it goes. And sometimes you're not going to really know, because if you're hanging around in like the fifth, sixth, seventh page, in general, you're not really going to see those major differences, because there's not as much data being collected on those pages. So you won't get the feedback loop that's required to see how. So yeah, hopefully that helps. It's kind of focus on those small conversions, those impressions, clicks, those views, and then the bookings to all the way to how many people contact you, and making those improvements. If you want to break things down, tracking your search visibility in general, and just adding your properties in Rankbreeze and kind of optimizing it based on the tips that are provided based on for the titles that we've kind of dove into, and testing your assumptions, and just letting the dust settle and letting Airbnb work in your favor.
There's smoke coming from my Apple Pencil from all the notes. That was so good, Kelvin. Oh my gosh, that was so good. And I'm so glad I opted not to answer all of the questions about Rankbreeze. You know what? Let's have Kelvin come in and explain this to us. And it's wow, it's so in depth that it wouldn't be something that's easy to keep up with if you're doing the manual job, which is how I started, manually just looking. So that definitely would not be the easiest way to do it. And so thank you so much for going over the importance of the title, because I work with clients and new investors who outsource the property management, and the title may be something kind of, I would say specific to, say, their favorite book, and that's cute and all, but does it, really address the guests that are coming, does it really give them the story of what exactly the property can provide? Like you said, you're looking for views. Rooftop is a fantastic one. The offer, that one right there, I double highlighted and circled that one. That's cool. I've seen that before, but I didn't really look into that. So that's a good one too. So the title is so important, because a lot of times folks aren't reading all of the details of the description. You just get that picture in that title to identify who's going to click.
So one thing that might be helpful to talk about, because you said that you speak to some people and their titles are just, they're very personal, and I think I understand where that comes from. But really, we talk about Airbnb, we can also talk about VRBO, we can talk about pretty much anything, but we can break it down like this. So since we're kind of on the topic of search engines, there's traditional search engines such as Google, for example, and then there's marketplace search engines. So that would be Airbnb. Amazon is another marketplace search engine. So if you want to think about that kind of stuff, that might be helpful. But in another way, maybe something that's a little bit more approachable is given the idea that it's Airbnb is a marketplace, right? So imagine if you were selling fruit. Maybe you were a farmer and you go to the market and you are trying to sell fruit, but everyone else has fairly similar fruit, maybe the same sizes and things like that. Your sign should be the best sign out of all of those ones, right? If you have kind of the same product, I'm not saying everybody has the same product, but I'm just saying that you have to think about it from a marketplace. Imagine if you were walking through a marketplace on Saturday night and there's all these different things trying to catch your attention, right? That's the same thing that a guest is going through, except they're doing it digitally on Airbnb.
Awesome. And you're right, because in the units where we have very similar to our competitors, I'll throw something in my title like king bed, I mean, not the most, mind-blowing thing, but king bed, hello, that's something that's really sought after, so it's as simple as adding something like that to the title, right? What do you think, Kelvin?
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. That is pretty much you want to add things that people are searching for, even, if you happen to have a Harry Potter property, then you're probably going to put Harry Potter in there somewhere. Absolutely. In your title. But it's those things that kind of work together and improve your search visibility, right? If somebody's looking for something specific, and if they can't find it on Airbnb, they sometimes go to Google to search for things like that, right? And Google indexes Airbnb listings. And sometimes that's how people find properties, right? If they're looking for example, a boathouse or something like that. And I think Airbnb's probably changed their categories by now, but back then there wasn't really an opportunity to find these very, very specific things. And people knew they were out there. And when I've spoken to other hosts, they've just kind of said that people just end up finding them somehow. And then what do you know? You type up Airbnb something and then boathouse or the city and then the boathouse, and there they were, ranking number 1 happened to be. So I assume that there was probably some you can track that stuff. You can definitely see like search volume that goes through Google. But yeah, that's the title, going back to that, the title and adding things like that, such as your the king bed, that is a good strategy.
Yeah, awesome. And you're absolutely right. Like a book like Harry Potter, you definitely want to highlight that, because that is definitely a cool amenity, and it's a well-known, book and movie and series and all of that stuff. And so what I will tell you that I loved about Rankbreeze, Kelvin, was, as you become more and more professional host, and I feel like you forget things, right? So every little tweak that I made to optimize my listing, I had the opportunity to journal within Rankbreeze so that I could know these are the tweaks I made, and I go back and check. And, depending on where my listing is did it help or did it not really help? And so I do love that about Rankbreeze, the journaling aspect of it, because you know what, when I also used it, I would quickly identify. So for one of our listings, it's a smaller listing where we can house 6 guests. If I'm searching for 6 guests, I would rank maybe on page 2, but if I'm searching for 2 guests, I would rank on page 1, and I couldn't crack that code, so to speak. So what I would do was kind of tinker with, identify the others that are top ranked for the actual property that's not ranked, and then I would just try to see what it is that they have that either I don't have, like why. So just troubleshooting in my own limited capacity as to why I would be ranked, on page 2 or 3 or 4 for a number of guests, but yet a different number of guests, I would be on page 1. Any insight on how that algorithm works and why it's doing that?
I think I'll put a caveat and say I don't know every single thing, and I'm not sure if anybody really does. But as far as my intuition says is that Airbnb is a matchmaking system, right? So they're constantly trying to match people up with properties that they know that if Airbnb puts this particular listing in front of somebody that is searching for this guest count, then what is the likelihood that somebody will book this property? And generally that has to do with things like people that booked your property in the past. So I think that if you want to improve your rankings for some guest counts that you're not doing too well in, I think first of all, you just kind of have to be, you'll have to be reasonable in a sense, right? Like I think I was speaking to somebody the other day, and they had a mansion. They had a mansion, and they were asking these, and they did ask that question, about rankings. And I just had to say to them, well, it's very unlikely that you will get a booking from a one guest. Maybe if, Mark Zuckerberg is booking your property and he just wants to chill out and not talk to anybody or something like that, right? That might be possible. But in general, it's a matchmaking system, right? But just in general, you want to be reasonable and think that, sometimes you're not going to be able to rank for things if you have a huge guest count, right? But in general, if you want to think about if you want to think about trying to improve your rankings for a specific guest count, I think there's probably a few things we could talk about. So one thing that we do is we kind of call it like smart wish listing. I don't know if that's a great term for it, but wish listing is a thing that Airbnb looks at, and you can kind of see those metrics in Airbnb too in the performance dashboard. But what we'll do is we'll actually go and select a specific date and the specific guest count, and when we'll ask somebody to guess us the property, or not guess us the property, to wish us the property. That's kind of like one thing that we found, is because it's just a little bit better than when you ask somebody to come and wish list your property. But it's very rare that a person will actually really go and find a property and wish list it, and there's no dates associated, there's no guest counts, there's nothing, right? It's very rare, versus something that has an actual guest count and an actual date set. That has to me would be a better indication of somebody who is actually trying to look for this property, not just asking their friend to wish list it. So maybe that's one thing you can try. A second thing would be to run what we call a spot check. So in Rankbreeze, what you can do is there's kind of a table that you can see, and then there's all these dates on the top, and they're broken down in different ranges. Like typically it has to do with your average length of stay. So let's say your average length of stay is 5 days. So you'll have these 5-date increments. And what happens is that you can go on Rankbreeze and you can look at those increments. And I would go down to that specific guest count and try and find a weekend that's available. And you can click a little button. It's called the spot check button. You click it, and then it opens up Airbnb, and you can essentially see a zoomed in version of where your property is for that date, and for that date range, and then also for that guest count that you're trying to focus on. And then from there, the spot check really just involves putting yourself in the shoes of a guest and trying to look at it from that point of view. So if somebody's coming up and they're going to look at your property for that guest count and for a weekend date, is it likely they're going to book my place? Are we a little too high out of range compared to our closest comparable? Is our title attention grabbing enough? Things like that are these call them spot checks, just because they're kind of exactly what they sound like. We're really just running a spot check and seeing how we're performing for that guest count, but really are putting ourselves in the shoes of a guest. And the third thing in terms of trying to improve your search ranking for a specific guest count is just getting more guests to book that at that guest count. So whatever you can do to stimulate a booking is probably my suggestion. There's in the world of SEO search engines, there search engine rankings or search engine optimization, there's white hat methodologies, things that are not breaking terms of service, and there's black hat opportunities that you can do. I'm not really going to go around those two things, but I think you guys kind of know what I'm saying. You want to stimulate a booking. One way that you can do that is, again, putting an offer in the title, or maybe you can do something like if somebody books 6 guests or more, we will include a bottle of wine or something like that. Things like that you can creatively use to stimulate a booking at that guest count. And then from there, that kind of gets Airbnb to understand, okay, we sent somebody here, there was a 6th guest because of that particular reason. And that just kind of snowballs in itself. And you can go up and up and up after that, right?
So many gems. Oh my gosh. Love, love, love all the gems. And
short-term gems.
Yes. And that's why, so up until now, you're right, we didn't really talk about pricing because that's one area that's so important, and in terms of your comps, you want to be priced appropriately. But, I haven't heard you say, Kelvin, to increase your rankings. Look, I'm taking all of the notes. I'm in school today, guys. If you guys are listening and you're not taking any notes, you're leaving money on the table, just saying. So we went over number 1, the micro conversions. We went over number 2, finding out exactly where you are in the ranking. We went over number 3, you're going to test your assumptions. Never did you really say, lower your price to rock bottom, in order to improve your rankings. And that's something that I see that's done a lot. Yes, you want to kind of tweak and make sure that your pricing is priced appropriately. You're still giving the good value, but you don't seem to be a proponent for just dropping your price till the cows come home. And I believe that's something that we see sometimes in some markets, and it can be a little bit, challenging, so I do appreciate the perspective of so many other levers that we can pull, because the pricing lever is almost like putting a hatchet to it. Yes, we know we can do that, but what are some of the other things we can do?
Yeah, I think while we're kind of on that topic about prices, is that yes, if you lower your price, you will improve your rankings. That is definitely something we have seen. But we didn't really focus on this conversation. I don't really talk about that too much, in a sense, just because the whole idea of trying to improve your search visibility is to not decrease your prices. So that's kind of everything we're talking about, is using that as a last resort. Of course, it makes sense to lower prices, because if you lower prices, most people are attracted to lower prices, and that leads to more clicks and things like that, right? But it's a business, so you don't really want to do that. And we're trying to kind of highlight all these different ways in which you can achieve better rankings without leaning on dropping your prices lower and lower and lower and lower again, right? And that is kind of a frustrating thing about being a property manager and a host and stuff like that. It's just because I wish there was a button, or you could just tell that person that's right by you not to lower their price, because if we were like a gas station, if everybody worked together like a coalition almost, and we all had similar prices and we all worked together in a network, I think we would be better off, right? Rather than that neighbor who keeps lowering prices, and then the algorithms, or people that are using some pricing tools and stuff like that, those prices just get ultimately lowered and lowered because they're using other properties as signals as well, right? And it makes sense, but that's kind of this small tangent I'm probably going to stop at right now. But yeah, we just try to not talk about lowering prices, because there are other things that you can do to stimulate better rankings.
Awesome. And that's what we're talking about today, your solution for stimulating better rankings. So a couple comments and a question. Julie George, $1 Million Host, says, hi, Rachel and Kelvin, love Rankbreeze. So excited to hear so many host success stories recently that include boosting their listing views on this platform. And then she comments, I love that Rachel's taking so many notes. Look, my head is like, I'm back to school, guys. I am taking so many notes. Just the value and the gems that Kelvin is dropping today, guys. Oh my gosh, it has me. We have some work to do for sure. So
I am
super
also a
excited
fan
about
of Julie
that.
George too. I would say that. I do. I remember listening to a podcast that she did quite a while ago, and I think she was kind of remembering the day when I think she had a property and she decided, I don't know if I should really keep this property because it's by, I think it's by a crack house or something like that. So she kind of got rid of that and changed her whole business. And yeah, that's one story that I always remember about her journey there.
Oh, Julie, you didn't tell me that one. I need to hear that story. That's hilarious. Oh my gosh. Okay, so question from Michael Doc Rivers. Do you try to mimic hotel prices or just go by local B&B prices? That's a good question. I'll take a stab real quick. So Michael, I actually use a dynamic pricing tool, and there are many of them out there. The top most popular are Price Labs, Beyond Pricing, and Wheelhouse. Buoy is a newer pricing tool as well. We actually had the opportunity to interview Tim Spiker of Buoy, the founder of Buoy. So look in our thread and you'll see that interview. And I think this is the last week he's offering some revenue management data for us in this group. So take advantage of that because you're going to have to start paying for it afterwards. So those are my 2 cents. So Price Labs uses B&B pricing. I know that Tim says his Buoy, it uses hotel pricing as well. So yeah, so those are my 2 cents. Kelvin, any thoughts?
I think the question was around whether hotel prices should matter in the pricing of a short-term rental. I think is that kind of his question?
Maybe that is what he intended. He said, do you try to mimic hotel prices or just go by local B&B prices? So maybe you can expound on that from your perspective.
I tend to not really pay attention too much to hotel prices, mostly because well, there's a few different reasons, but in general, when a person is searching on Airbnb, there's no real other competition that has to do with hotels, except, well, there are hotels on there, but I think he's probably talking about, like off of Airbnb and stuff like that. But in general, if you just want to focus on your particular market and your local area based on a certain radius, that's probably going to give you the best judgment for where to price at. In Rankbreeze, we have a pretty simple pricing tool in which you can add in your competitors. So you can choose and create a custom comparable set. And then it's very similar to your multi-calendar that you see in Airbnb. And you can kind of scroll horizontally. And once you add those competitors in, you can kind of see your prices along with the prices of other properties around you. You can see what they're priced at for every single day, as well as, when they're booked, unbooked, and what prices they were booked at for their base rate. So that's maybe one concept idea that I would say. But I guess fundamentally, the reason why I don't really pay that much attention to hotel prices is because I think that the Airbnb or the short-term rental or the vacation rental guest is a little different than the hotel guest. Yeah, I think that I just love vacation rentals, so I don't stay in hotels unless I'm forced to. Honestly, most of the time I'm going to do the best I can to find a vacation rental because I like the product and the experience of vacation rentals more than hotels. So for me, I don't even really compare the two. I won't even think about staying in a hotel, mostly because we don't have a kitchen for the most part, unless you're staying in something like the Marriott that has the vacation club and they've got that stuff set up there. But in general, I just think it's a different product, it's a different experience. So for me, from my perspective, hotel prices aren't as relevant because they're not in the mindset of somebody who would be more dedicated to staying in a vacation rental versus staying in a hotel.
That makes sense. Awesome. Okay, so let me look. So Julie says, Kevin, Mutual Admiration Society exists. That's right. No one wants a crack house Airbnb. It is not great for reviews, even if it's a cultural experience.
Yeah, that's exactly what she said. Yeah, you can add that in your title and you can get, decent rates and stuff like that. But ultimately there's going to be some different factors in play. Actually, that probably reminds me of something that maybe we could talk a little bit about, since we're kind of on that topic. It just reminded me. So Airbnb has all these different ranking factors, and I think they've mentioned about 150 plus ranking factors. We've found about how many? 28 that we've put together. So if you just pretty much just look up Airbnb ranking factors in Google and you search for Rankbreeze and somewhere on the search results there, then you'll see a piece of content that we put together. It's very long, but it's well worth the time to go through. But in general, I think we might want to talk about some things like the idea that overall there's kind of these three core areas that are involved with rankings and in the ranking factors. So overall, you've kind of got your availability. So that's important, right? So without any availability, you are not going to be found in search results. So that's kind of the baseline, right? You have to have some dates available in order to be found on Airbnb. So that's important.
Let's pause right there. So define that from an Airbnb ranking perspective. Available for 30 days, available for 60 days, available for 90 days. In terms of opening, how far do I open my calendar? Is that a part of it too?
That's a good question. I don't know if I would even say that we would need to get that microscopic with it.
Okay.
It's just in general, any availability is good. From what I can tell, Airbnb they don't really differentiate between when somebody blocks their calendar. So Airbnb just wants all the bookings for every vacation rental. Let's be honest here, right? They're a big company. They want to get all the bookings. They don't want people going to VRBO, booking.com and things like that. And I think one thing too that you may want to think about as well is that Airbnb still has lots of growth. I speak to people in Europe and things like that, and Airbnb is definitely not as big over there as it is in North America. So there's still a lot of room to grow, but in general, Airbnb just wants to have as much availability on their platform as possible. So yes, leaving your calendar out further ahead is good from an availability standpoint. I would just say that if you're going to be open for that long, just make sure you're priced well, that if somebody plans that far ahead in advance, that your prices are high enough that it's worth it, because you're kind of running the risk of opening your calendar so far in advance, right? But also maybe not running the risk because COVID.
Kelvin, yeah, that's true too. The reason I bring it up, Kelvin, is because, like you said, the algorithm changed, the searchability has changed. So if I'm just flexible date traveler, right? Mm-hmm. Wouldn't that person who has more availability have a little bit more of a leg up, the flexible, for those flexible, wide open travelers? I've searched in certain locations, and I guess the searching is so loose. I don't know if that's the right term for it. It's so loose that I'm provided properties outside of those locations more so than ever before.
Yeah, that is something new that Airbnb did last year, or was it this year? I can't remember. I think it could have been this year. My years are getting blended. I've been cooped up in. But yeah, and I think that just kind of doubles down on the fact that it's just general availability. Having lots of having the availability on Airbnb, that's what they like. Airbnb doesn't really differentiate between when you block out a date. They're not really care or understand really that booking is from VRBO or from booking.com, or you're just doing maintenance. All they know is that you don't have availability on that day, so they're not going to show you for those days because you're blocked off. and they're not really
Is that
making it
applicable
different.
if it's booked through Airbnb also, or if it's booked through Airbnb, they know that, oh yeah, this is one of our bookings? Is
Oh
that
yeah, yeah. Sorry,
okay?
I mean that if it's booked, if it's blocked off because it's a booking from Airbnb, then that would that would be a
Okay.
positive thing, right? But if it's
Okay.
blocked off, then Airbnb doesn't like that
Okay.
aspect of it.
Got it.
So yeah, there's kind of three core areas: availability, just like
Mhm.
baseline, you got to be available for dates. And the second thing is, so we're talking about ranking factors, right? There's the availability, making sure that you're available. That's
Mhm.
the baseline. The second is these engagement factors. Engagement factors are things we've kind of been talking about, such as clicks, time on page, conversion rates, views, things like that, how responsive you are to guests. All these things play a factor in terms of how every Airbnb is basically scoring every listing and every host, right? But let's just talk about listings. So how they're scoring a listing. And yeah, there's availability and there's these engagement factors. And then finally, there's hospitality factors. So these are the reviews that are provided. And then to go along kind of with that would be the post, I don't really know what to call them, the post stay survey, maybe. That when I say that, what I'm talking about is when a guest stays at your property and they are asked to leave a review, they kind of have the review broken down into two parts. There's the review that everyone else sees, and then there's the review that's provided directly to Airbnb. And the first review, I think most of us have gone through, where you just leaving some kind words for the host and leaving your star ratings for how was it, did you have fun, was the place clean, things like that. But then afterwards there's another survey that Airbnb asks that is a kind of what I would say is kind of part of their hospitality factors. And these are pretty interesting questions. It's very long. It's very, very long as well. I think the normal reviews that people see are about 2 pages maybe, and that's the public review that everybody sees on Airbnb. But there's this post stay survey that Airbnb is only asking for themselves, and this is a very, very in-depth review that is only going to Airbnb, and those things kind of all work together. So again, if we're talking about rankings and things like that, if you want to break things down very easily in your mind, you've got availability, you've got engagement factors, and then you also have hospitality factors, and all those things kind of work together in the score of your listing.
Wow, that is so good. So the post-stay review, who fills that out? Is that the guest that fills it out also?
Yeah, it's the guest that
Okay.
fills it out. I'm not really sure. It's very long. It's like 8 pages long, and they ask things such as, I think one of them is almost like confirming whether or not a host actually has a TV in their property. They said that TV. Did they have a TV? Do they actually have a TV? It's a very long survey. I'm not really sure if every guest would go through that because it's quite in depth. I went through it because it's kind of like my job to go through it. But it's just something to keep in mind, is that there's things that Airbnb is doing that are working all together with your properties that have to do with hospitality.
Awesome. Very, very interesting. And I noticed that as I think about identifying properties, I don't remember seeing that survey, but I've seen a lot of new amenities being added onto the platform. And that's definitely one way, right, Kelvin, to make sure that maybe you're doing some maintenance, you're checking all of the amenities that you may already have. Why not go in there and double check and make sure you tick those amenities, especially if they're already, if it's something that you have, like luggage. That was a new one not too long ago. Luggage,
EV chargers,
storage.
I think, is a new one.
Yeah, I saw that. EV chargers. Interesting. Awesome. So, Calvin, we are at our last moment here. Where can people learn more about Rankbreeze, or where can they find Rankbreeze?
You can find Rankbreeze. We have a kind of a link set up for the people of short-term gems, and it's rankbreeze.com/short short-term gems. And it's all spelt in one word, rankbreeze.com/short-term gems. Pretty much if you go there, we've got a bunch of information on what's included. Like I mentioned, we focus on rank optimization, price optimization, as well as market data. If you are kind of cruising around, I think a lot of you guys are probably investors, or even if you're not an investor, I would say that we kind of have, we have a few tiers, but overall, there's a middle tier that you can go with. And we have these small dollar paid trials. It's between a $7 to $9 paid trial, very, very small. And go for the $9 trial. I think you get significantly more value from there. Essentially, what that $9 trial gives you is everything is kind of what I've spoken about, but it also includes that market data. So it's kind of a Chrome extension as well as a market report. The Chrome extension is where you pretty much have, if you have this extension installed, you can go anywhere on Airbnb, whether it's your city, whether it's a neighboring state or province or a different country, and you can click on any Airbnb and see the rental data for that property. So rental income, occupancy rates, things like that. And then if you have the extension installed, you just position the map, and then from there we collect all the properties in the area and provide some interesting stats such as top properties, how the market's doing in terms of occupancy rates over the next few months, and then also the amenities that are also bringing in the most value the most income for guests or for hosts. Sorry, but yeah, overall that's probably where to find us is rankbreeze.com/short-term gems, and yeah, we'd love to work with you guys.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I had some fun kind of demoing that with you a few weeks ago. You know, I'm always wanting to know where the properties are that are the comparables or competition. And that is actually a strategy that I employ. So my strategy with our ownership side of the properties is how do we own and operate the least number of properties that generate the highest profitability. Because one thing we like to talk about, especially in luxury short-term rental investing, you can, really make a difference in your financial picture with just one or two properties if you purchase it correctly. And if you're looking at the amenities that the neighborhood across the way, the seven-figure neighborhood across the way is leveraging, well, is there a way you can build a fire pit too? Well, probably, some of the amenities you can definitely, try to implement in your property that may be cost effective. Do they use really good sheets? Well, give that a try, right? If they're advertising they're using Brooklinen, go for it and advertise you're using Brooklinen too. Then you really become a comp. You're offering nearly the same, types of amenities that property is offering. So that's what I love about short-term rentals. You can kind of break through a glass ceiling because of there's a lot that goes into long-term rentals, right? You have to be fair, affordable housing. You have to fall within a certain guideline. But with short-term rentals, vacation rentals, you're looking at, the comparables around you, how they're doing, and you can kind of, do the same, do better, do a little bit less, and just, set your own price, set your own value for the guests that you're serving. So love it. Just a quick announcement, everyone. If you have not signed up for the free luxury short-term rental masterclass, do not forget to do so. We have the masterclass coming up next week, where we will be covering how to get started in investing in short-term rentals. 3 questions answered, plus the question you really should be asking. Do not miss it. There are 3 dates to sign up. Reserve your seat today. You have to reserve your seat just because, the platform only allows a certain amount. So I have 3 dates, the 14th, the 15th, and the 22nd. There seems to be a little bit of demand. So I may add a 4th date just for those who cannot make it those 3 dates at various times, just to make sure that you all can attend. So it is shorttermgems.com/free masterclass, shorttermgems.com/free masterclass. Look forward to seeing you there. And Kelvin, I cannot thank you enough. Guys, Kelvin, I email him, and if I tell him I have a certain issue, his team is on the ball to help out, to remediate, to help me troubleshoot. So guys, it's not just a software, it is a service because they really respond. So Kelvin, thank you so much for putting this amazing product out. I love it and I would recommend it to anyone. So thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. It was a pleasure speaking with you and chatting with everybody else too. I hope you guys are having a good time.
All right. Bye now. Thank you. Let me see if I know how to end this appropriately.